Muy buenos días a todas y a todos. En
Good
nombre de la
morning,
Federación
everyone. On
Latinoamericana de
behalf of
Industria
the Latin American
Farmacéutica,
Foundation of the
Investigación y
Pharmaceutical
Desarrollo
Industry
FIFARMA,
for
les
Research
damos
and
la más
Development,
cordial
FIFARMA, we would
bienvenida y
like to welcome
agradecemos
you
su participación
and
en
we
nuestro
thank you for
webinar
your participation in
Investigación
this
Clínica en América
webinar,
Latina,
Clinical Research in
Oportunidad
Latin America,
Estratégica para
an
la Salud y
opportunity
la
for strategy
Inversión.
for health and
Mi nombre es Diego
investment.
Salas, soy el director de
My name
Asuntos
is Diego
Regulatorios de
Salas, Director of
FIFARMA
Regulatory
y me da el
Affairs for
gusto de
FIFARMA,
acompañarlos como
and
moderador
I'm
desde este
happy
espacio.
to join you as the
Antes de
moderator
comenzar, les
today.
compartiremos algunas
Before
breves
starting,
indicaciones
we'd like
técnicas.
to share some
Este
brief
webinar se desarrollará en
technical
idioma español y
indications.
contamos
This
con
webinar will take
interpretación
place in Spanish, but we have
simultánea en
simultaneous
portugués durante toda
interpretation
la sesión.
into English and
Para
Portuguese throughout the
seleccionar
whole
el
session.
idioma de su
And
preferencia,
to
pueden
choose
hacer
the
clic
language
en
of your
el icono
preference,
del
you can
globo
click
terráqueo
on
ubicado en la barra
the
inferior de su
globe
pantalla.
icon,
Allí se
and
desplegarán las tres
then
opciones de
we will
idiomas:
see the three
español,
options of
inglés y
languages:
portugués.
Spanish,
Solo
English, and
seleccionar el que
Portuguese.
desee.
And then you
Si
just
optan por
press the
escuchar la
language of
interpretación
choice.
en
If
inglés o
you want
portugués,
to hear
les
English or
recomendamos activar
Portuguese,
la
we
opción de
recommend to
silenciar audio
activate
original.
the
Esto mejorará
silence
la calidad de
original
la
audio
traducción y les
so
permitirá
that
seguir la sesión
you can
con
hear the
mayor
translation
facilidad.
clearly and follow the
Les
session.
compartimos la agenda que guiará nuestra
We would
sesión
like to
del día
share
de
the
hoy.
agenda to guide us
Iniciaremos con
today.
las palabras de
We'll start
bienvenida que
off
nos
with
darán el
the welcoming
contexto y la
words
inspiración para esta importante
that are
conversación.
inspiration for this conversation
Seguidamente
session.
presentaremos el
And then
estudio de
we will
investigación clínica
follow
en
with the
Latinoamérica,
clinical study
informe de
research
recomendaciones
in Latin
basadas en buenas
America, the
prácticas,
report based
una
on
mirada
best
técnica y
practices.
estratégica
We're going
sobre
to
las
look at
condiciones que hacen de
strategies
nuestra
and techniques
región
on the
una
conditions in our
oportunidad
region
real para el
and
desarrollo de la
real
investigación.
opportunities for the development of clinical
Después
research.
pasaremos a nuestro panel
Then
central
we will
titulado
go to our
Investigación
central
Clínica en
panel,
Latinoamérica,
Clinical
Ciencia,
Research in Latin
Estrategia y
America,
Oportunidades de
Science,
Salud,
Strategy, and
y allí
Development
escucharemos
Opportunity,
voces claves de la
and
industria
hearing
regional
the key
que
voices
compartirán su
in the
experiencia y
region
visión sobre
that
el
will share their
camino que debemos
experience and
seguir.
mission and the
Finalmente,
path to
cerraremos con
follow.
unas
And
síntesis
then
de
we will close
conclusiones y
with
mensajes claves
conclusions and
para
key
proyectarnos hacia
messages
los próximos
to
pasos. Una
project the
agenda
next steps.
concisa, estratégica y
This is a
diseñada
concise
para generar
agenda
impacto y
to
competencia.
generate an impact.
Bienvenidos. Para dar
Welcome,
inicio
everyone.
formal a este
To get
webinar,
started
tengo el
formally,
honor de ceder la
I have
palabra a
the
Janet
honor
Gija,
of handing
directora
over
ejecutiva
to
de
Janet
FIFARMA,
Jiha,
quien nos brindará
Director
unas
of
palabras de
FIFARMA,
bienvenida y
who
nos
will provide
compartirá la
some
misión de
welcoming
nuestra
words
organización
and
sobre
share
el
the
rol
mission of the
estratégico de la
organization
investigación
on the
clínica en
strategic
América
role of
Latina.
clinical research in Latin
Adelante,
America.
Janet.
Muchas
Janet, you have the
gracias,
floor.
Diego, y muy
Thank you,
bienvenidos a
Diego,
todos los que nos
and welcome
acompañan el día de hoy.
everyone who is joining us
Realmente es un
today.
gusto dar la
This
bienvenida
is
a este
a
espacio de
pleasure
reflexión y
to
análisis sobre un
welcome
tema
everyone
que creemos que
for
no es
reflection and analysis
solamente
on a
para nuestra
topic which we
región, es
believe is not just
profundamente
strategic for the
transformador.
region, but
Creemos que la
strategically
investigación clínica
transforming.
puede ser un motor
We
de salud,
believe
pero también de desarrollo.
clinical research can
Desde la
be a
Federación
motor for
Latinoamericana
change
de
and
Industrias
health, and
Farmacéuticas de
from the
Investigación y
FIFARMA
Desarrollo, FIFARMA,
organization,
representamos a 18
we'd like
compañías
to
biofarmacéuticas
we
innovadoras en
represent 18
11
biopharmaceutical
asociaciones locales
companies
de
in
la región.
11
Y
local and
compartimos
regional
una convicción
associations, and we
profunda
share a
que la
deep
salud y la
conviction,
innovación
which
caminan
is health and
juntas
innovation
y
are
que solo
walking
mediante el trabajo
together, and
colaborativo
only through
podremos construir
collaborative
sistemas
efforts
más
can we
sólidos,
offer more
resilientes y
solid
sobre
and
todo
resilient
centrados en
systems,
las personas.
especially focused on
Hoy más
people.
que nunca tenemos la
Today, more
oportunidad de
than ever, we have the
redefinir el
opportunity
papel
of
de América Latina
redefining
en el mapa
the
global de la
role of Latin
innovación en
America in
salud.
the global map
Y la
of the health
investigación
industry.
clínica, sin
And
duda,
clinical
es una
research
puerta de
undoubtedly
entrada
is a
privilegiada a
door
ese
of
futuro, una
entry
puerta que
to that
debemos
future,
aprovechar.
which we should
No solo permite a los
harness.
pacientes
Not just allowing
acceder
patients
a
to have
tratamientos que
access to
antes
treatments
probablemente no
that
podían ser
they never
posibles
had
para ellos,
before or were never
también dinamiza
possible, but
economía,
also
genera empleo calificado,
changing
impulsa
economies,
el conocimiento
generating
local y
jobs,
posiciona
promoting
a
the
nuestros países
local
como destinos
knowledge,
de confianza
and
para la
the
inversión
roles
y la
of
investigación
trust for
científica.
investment and
Por
research.
eso, y eso es parte de las razones por las cuales
Therefore, and
estamos el
this is
día de hoy
part
acá,
of
me
today's
complace compartir
activity,
con ustedes los
we
hallazgos del
it's a
estudio
pleasure for us
regional desarrollado por
uh,
Salud, ya conocerán a nuestros investigadores
join our
principales,
panelists.
que fue desarrollado, por
And
supuesto, liderado por FIFARMA,
of
pero
course,
sí ha hecho un
this
trabajo
was led
realmente
by FIFARMA, and the
maravilloso
work
para
has been
poder
done
entender
marvelously to be able
dónde
to
están
address
los desafíos,
or
pero también
understand where the challenges
resaltar
are,
a
and
aquellas
especially
oportunidades y
to
aquellos temas
present
que
the
estamos
opportunities
haciendo bien en la
that we
región.
have on the
El
topics that we
estudio
have
lo que intenta es
nowadays.
ofrecer un panorama
The
regional
study
comparativo
offered,
basado en
which is
fuentes
a
oficiales
comparative
y
offer,
entrevistas con
is based on
profesionales del
official
ecosistema.
sources and interviews
Muestra,
in the
como dije
ecosystem.
hace un momento,
And
tanto
like I
los
said,
avances
it
logrados como
relies
las
on the
áreas donde todavía
advancements
tenemos
and
una tarea por
areas
hacer
where we
o
still have
oportunidades
a
que
job to
aprovechar.
do or opportunities to
Compartiré,
take advantage
porque pues
of.
me
I'm
encantaría
going to
poder
share, of
hacerlo y yo
course,
sé que
because I'd love to to do this, and I know that you'll see that in detail. Some of the things that are highlighted in the studies in the countries that we've seen. For example, Mexico is a country that has started to acknowledge and harvest the path of clinical research. And in its National Innovation Plan, basically they're already trying to start a plan for that to happen. Argentina has over 1,900 studies, but of course needs to advance in the regulatory work and make it more predictable for research centers. And this is a job that is there for them. In Chile, there's over 1,100 studies that have taken over 5 years, and this shows a country with a smaller population than others, but they're capturing an important number of clinical studies and giving an ecosystem with high potential. Undoubtedly, there's topics that could improve and even processes that could be simplified. So we'll give some information that is in the study and helps us understand where we are and what are the paths that we have to follow. Those numbers, at the end of the day, are not just numbers. They are opportunities. They are patients that could benefit. They are patients that could actually have an opportunity that didn't have before. They are professionals that develop science and help to protect what we have in our countries. And it's systems that could strengthen locally, and it's a power and a value that is exceptional. At FIFARMA, we are convinced that this is the moment for Latin America to become a strategic region for clinical research. Today, we're not, and the numbers show this. But we believe that this is a marvelous moment in the countries and governments, everyone with the intention of having this potential. But to achieve this, we have to add capacities, articulate efforts, and take brave decisions. Our commitment is clear to strengthen the region, to promote more efficient pathways and open forums like this one to show a shared agenda in health. Thank you so much, Tomás Montalbán and the team from Citizen for the work they've done, and each and everyone who are joining us today. And your attendance here shows your interest and commitment to be able to move forward with this agenda, which is an ambitious agenda, but it's feasible if we all undertake the task of following it. So I'd like to invite you all to listen carefully today and also to imagine a future together, to dream together, and to take action with these dreams. Thank you, and Diego, I hand over back to you so that we can get this webinar started. Thank you, Janet, for your words, your vision, your leadership. And following, we will hand over to the central presentation, which is the study and clinical research in Latin America, report and recommendations based on best practices. And as Janet mentioned, it was put together by Sinsalud in Spain in collaboration with FIFARMA. And joining us are two highly ranked professionals with broad experience in the assessment of these systems. On the one hand, we have Tomás Montalbán, lawyer, trained in administration and marketing. He's the director of CD Salud. He has led several projects and worked for universities, research centers in the pharmaceutical sector, and other activities in the similar fields. Also joining us, Ana Gonzalez, biologist, master's degree in sanitary administration, and has occupied high senior roles in institutes like the Biomedical Salamanca Institute and Fundación Luzón, and she has broad experience in clinical research, public health, and has worked in project assessment as well. So it's an honor to have your experience, both of you, and we hand over to you both.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, now we're sharing the presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. I see there's a lot of attendance. Thank you all for connecting in this presentation. And as Janet mentioned, I'd like to highlight the two things first. She's mentioned that these studies have been done in many interviews, and this is key because it's a study that is essentially qualitative, and we've had several profiles, many countries, and we have the information of what profiles you have as the main beneficiaries of all this information in clinical management. So also highlighting from the beginning, there is a QR code to be able to download the report. It's a report that has been has a lot of features and has a lot of information, technical information on how to lead or how to undertake initiatives to promote this research, and it has a lot of value technically, and you're going to be able to find information on how to use the training of professionals, assays, and financial management, and a series of attributes that are very important to know. What practical examples or successful examples, and with enough detail to guide our activity. So going on to the report now, you're going to find at the first instance a contextualization of why that clinical research takes place. And it's important for countries. So we have taken this powerful message, and with all the clinical research and patients, professionals and health systems, and the whole set of the economy of the different countries. And on the effect of these patients, we talk about how to develop clinical research and how this enables access to patients, to innovative pharmaceuticals, and in regard to the therapies in the different countries and centers, and the advantage of this inclusive management, which has a more detailed treatment, more thorough, and in terms of adverse effects and control, and the personalization, which is, of course, these are more connected to biomarkers. So this has to be developed in a country with relevant activities and clinical research, and we can take these treatments and effects. And in terms of messages for professionals, these have been highlighted in how to promote the clinical development activities, and with more updated information in current treatments and new agents, reagents, and how this allows that, in addition to becoming part of the roster of possibilities, they also become important at the international and international levels. So this is an example of how these opportunities in research, clinical research, optimize everything, optimize all the activity in research, and that coordination of professionals also leads to optimizing the research on clinical activity, and to avoid several countries and groups of specialists from being or taking focus on a different hypothesis, and that they can be combined in optimizing everything. So in regard to a health system, we would like to highlight very relevant things. So at least for us, they're absolutely key, and for our health systems. So the most important thing is the savings in pharmaceutical expenses that we collected some numbers for, and for the oncological patient, and a clinical trial has some savings estimated in Spain at 11 or 12,000 euro per treatment per patient. So that also transforms the hospitals and the centers that have an activity in organ transplant. And in Spain, we always say that there's an activity, a relevant activity, that improves the whole set, which is mandatory to have optimum levels in clinical analysis, and a whole bunch of specialties in clinical investigation also has a similar impact. So this is relevant for the needs and to develop clinical investigation, and for health professionals And thanks. I'm sorry, he's breaking up.
Y luego, bueno, en cuanto a países,
Apologies, but we're having some sound issues.
pues genera un empleo cualificado aquí tenemos un 9%.
Tomás, estamos teniendo problemas con
Having
tu
some
conexión, no
connectivity
logramos
issues.
escucharte adecuadamente.
We cannot hear him
¿Desde cuándo? ¿Ahora?
Los últimos
just
30
now.
segundos quizá.
Last 30 seconds.
Vale, disculpad. ¿Ahora bien?
Sorry, is it
Ahora
better
bien,
now?
adelante.
Yes. Thank you.
Disculpa. Bueno, pues comentaba,
Apologies.
no sé
So
si se escuchó, pues de
I don't know if you heard,
efecto,
but
digamos, en la economía
the
de los
effects,
países, desarrollo
the economy in the
de la
countries,
investigación clínica, ¿no?
in
cuanto a
clinical
generación de
research,
empleo cualificado,
and the generation of qualified jobs, and
una actividad de investigación de I+D+I
this
en
is
salud
an
muy
activity
relevante
of research that is
para los
very
países si lo
relevant
comparamos con
for
las
the
cifras
countries,
de
and
inversión
we
global en
compare that
investigación y
to the
desarrollo.
global
Y
numbers
bueno,
in
pues,
R&D,
con las recomendaciones que
and
recogemos en el
with the
informe,
recommendations that we have,
relativamente fácil implantación,
which
¿no?
are
Es una,
relatively easy to
I+D
implement.
cuesta,
And so,
o que requiere menos inversión
and
que otros
what is
sectores de investigación
required,
para ponerse en marcha. Por no extenderme mucho
so
más,
I don't want to
la parte,
overextend
digamos, cuantitativa o
myself, but the
destacar que hay un
quantitative
análisis
aspect
comparativo
as a
de la
comparative
investigación
analysis
en los
of the
diferentes
research
países. Ya
in the
comentaba
different
René
countries,
algunas grandes
as
cifras
we were
para los
mentioning, with some
países,
numbers,
pues,
and
principalmente de contexto. Como
mainly
decía al principio,
with the
pues es
development, as I
especialmente
said at the
relevante
beginning,
que se atienda a la parte
it is
cualitativa,
relevant
pues,
to
a esos
have
niveles de percepción,
the
digamos, de
different
importancia que se le dan las
levels
barreras por parte
of
de
importance of the barriers.
por último, antes de
And
pasar la
lastly,
palabra a Ana para entrar más en la parte
before handing over
metodológica
to
del
Anna
estudio,
for the
insistir en una
study,
idea. La investigación clínica tiene
we would
muchísimas
insist on an
ventajas,
idea
muchísimas ventajas,
which
pero como
is
hemos comentado,
has a
pero
lot
es
of
altamente
advantages
competitiva y
and
se
highly
desarrolla en un entorno
competitive
global, mundial.
in a
No,
global sphere.
no hay un número ilimitado
And
de
there's
centros en
no
desarrollo,
limited
obviamente.
number in this
Entonces,
development.
la
So
farmacéutica, tiempos
the important
cortos y
thing is
cierta armonización de los
to have
procedimientos,
certain
intentar
harmonization of the
encontrarse, digamos,
requirements
con procesos
and
de aprobación
the
similares
processes for
y es muy
approval.
importante que
It's very
sepamos
important
que
to
esos niveles de competitividad
have
son
these levels of
absolutamente claves
competitiveness, which are
para
absolutely
lograr
key
ese impulso, ese desarrollo
for
en
achieving this
Latinoamérica y
process
dar, por
and
supuesto,
progress in Latin America,
garantías y
and
éticas
to have these ethical
a los ojos
guarantees
de los pacientes, que hay que
and
tener siempre en cuenta.
for the
Entonces, Ana, te
patients.
paso la palabra
So I hand over to you, Anna,
de
and
metodología y contenidos.
for the
Muchas
contents.
gracias, Tomás.
Thank you, Thomas.
Muchas gracias a todos los
So thank
asistentes. En
you,
cuanto a la
everyone. And
metodología,
so about the
como comentaba mi
methodology,
compañero,
as my
consiste, por
colleague
una
said,
parte, en un
it's
análisis
on the one hand of a
cuantitativo que hemos realizado
quantitative analysis that
con
is
base en los
centralized,
datos de
and the
clinicaltrials.gov a modo de contextualización de la investigación
information
clínica en los
in
distintos
clinical
países
research,
analizados. Y lo que creemos que aporta mayor
and
valor
what
es
we
la
believe that
participación a
contributes
través de
to this participation throughout
entrevistas
the
de
interviews that we've
45
had. So
profesionales del
45
sector con una
professionals
amplia
in the
experiencia y
sector
un amplio conocimiento
with broad
sobre el
knowledge
terreno de la investigación
on the
clínica que se
ground
desarrolla en
and
Latinoamérica,
of
¿no?
the
Entre ellos,
research that is done,
representantes de compañías de la industria
and the representatives from
farmacéutica, de
companies
organizaciones
and the
de
pharmaceutical
investigación por
industry
contrato CROs,
and contractual
sus
research
asociaciones
and
locales
their
y
local
también
associations, and
patrocinadores de
also
ensayos clínicos
the
públicos.
sponsors of
Todo esto
clinical
nos da una
trials.
visión
So
global y
this all
además
gives us a
desde
global vision,
distintas perspectivas
and
que
from
nos ha
different
permitido llevar a
perspectives
cabo
that have allowed
este
us to
trabajo y que es parte del
conduct
valor del
this
mismo, sin
work, which
duda.
is part of
¿Y por qué España,
the
como
added value?
comentaba
And
Tomás, al
why
final tenemos
Spain,
como
as
objetivo
Thomas
con el
mentioned?
estudio?
We have
Identificar
some
cuáles son
purposes
esas
of the study to
principales
identify
barreras y
which are the
aportar
main barriers
recomendaciones
and to
que se
provide
basan
recommendations
en el
based
modelo de éxito
on
español. Pues,
the
¿por qué
success
España? Pues porque
in
además de
Spain,
reunir algunas
because
condiciones
apart from
similares con
certain
Latinoamérica,
similar conditions with Latin America,
como tipo de sistema
such as the
de
types
aseguramiento
of systems,
sanitario, por
etc.,
ser
we
de un número muy elevado de
don't have
industria, de
a high
compañías
number
farmacéuticas, por
of
ejemplo, las de los Estados
pharmaceutical
Unidos, ¿no?
industries
Aparte
as
de esto es
would
que
the
nos
United
hemos
States, for example.
posicionado
So
como líderes
Uh,
europeo en investigación
we've
clínica con
positioned ourselves as a
medicamentos,
European leader in
mantener una
medication
posición
supply,
como
but
país con mayor número de
maintaining a
estudios
position
patrocinados
with more sponsored
a
studies,
nivel
etc.,
global, como decía, y este
at the global level.
posicionamiento
And this
interesantemente
position,
no es
the
de
interesting
siempre, no ha
thing
sido
is
siempre así,
that it
sino
has not
que
always
se ha
been the
producido en
case.
los últimos años y
So
es
it's
fruto
happened in the last few
del
years, and it's a
compromiso de los
fruit
distintos
of the
agentes
commitment of different
que
agents
han tenido visión y han
that
apoyado
have
los
had a
cambios
vision
necesarios para
and
alcanzar esta
supported the
posición,
necessary
aprovechando
changes
sobre
for this
todo
position, taking
ventanas de
advantage
oportunidad que se han
of
abierto en los últimos
windows
años,
of
especialmente en
opportunity that have
materia
opened up
regulatoria, ¿no?
in the
Que ha
last few years in
supuesto
the
un
regulatory
cambio
aspect. So
fundamental
this
en
is
el
a fundamental
posicionamiento de
change
España como
in
líder de
Spain.
investigación clínica. Y entrando ya en detalle
And coming into the
el
details
contenido propiamente dicho del
of the
informe,
content of the report,
ese primer punto,
that first point is
identificación de barreras, las podemos
identification of barriers.
agrupar en
We
tres
can group
grandes
them
bloques o
into
categorías que
three
hemos
different
venido a
categories or
denominar
blocks:
recursos,
and
estrategia y
resources,
socio.
strategy, and
Se
support.
identifica una
And
falta de recursos
we
específicos para
identify
seguir potenciando, para
a
crecer
number
en
of resources
investigación
that
clínica,
are missing for this
especialmente
clinical
recursos
research
a
to take place,
disposición de los
especially
centros
resources for the
del sistema
centers
público, ¿no? Cuando
in the
hablamos de
public
recursos nos
system.
referimos a disponer
When
de
we
recursos
talk about
humanos
this, we're talking
formados,
about
no solo
human
formados, sino también
resources
motivados,
that are
redes de
motivated as well,
colaboración que permitan
and
atraer más
cooperation
proyectos,
that allow us to have more
capacidad
projects and
de
capacity
gestión, de
for
reinversión de
management
fomento
of
a nivel
investment
local
locally
de esta
and
actividad y, por supuesto,
in
espacios y
this activity,
equipamientos
and
específicos,
also
¿no? Sobre todo
specific
si nos
spaces. So
queremos dirigir a ensayos en las
we want
primeras
to talk
fases, en
about
fases
these
tempranas, ¿no?
phases first.
Ese segundo
So
bloque nos viene a
the
indicar
second
que
block tells
en
us
general
that
hay una falta de
there
una
is a
estrategia
lack
de
of
país que se
strategy in the
base en
country,
datos
and
y que
that is based
se
on
enfoque,
data
como
and
comentaba mi compañero
focuses,
Tomás,
as my
en
colleague
mejorar la
said, on
competitividad, ¿no?
improving the
No se identifican indicadores públicos
identification,
ni
public
actualizados más
indication,
allá de los
or
puramente
indicators
descriptivos de
more than
actividad, ¿no?
the
Del número de ensayos
described
clínicos,
activities, clinical
las
trials,
fases, etcétera.
etc.
Tampoco, salvo
Also,
algunas excepciones que hemos
except for
identificado,
some
estrategias de país que se basen en
exceptions,
reconocer y valorar la
then the
investigación clínica
countries need to assess
por
this
sus
clinical
efectos
research
positivos que comentaba
because of
antes
its
Tomás.
positive effects.
Muchos
So now
países,
many
los tiempos regulatorios
countries,
constituyen
the
realmente un aspecto
regulatory
crítico, ¿no?
aspects have this
Para poder
clinical
incrementar la
point
investigación que se
to
puede hacer.
increase
También las normas,
research.
los
So
procedimientos,
also the
muchos de
norms,
esos identificados están
procedures,
alejados de lo comúnmente
and
aceptado a
this
nivel
is
internacional y esto
more
puede
distant
también ser
from
una
what has
barrera
been
para que
commented, and this is a barrier
los
for
promotores, los patrocinadores de los
the
estudios
sponsors of the studies
incrementen
to
esa
increase that
países, ¿no? Y por último, el gran bloque
part of the
de la
countries, and
sociedad. No se,
also the
se ha
society,
reconocido en
and
general una mejora de la
to
percepción
improve
social de la investigación clínica y
the
de los ensayos clínicos
clinical
a raíz
investigation
de todo el trabajo que
and
se realizó durante la
all the work that
pandemia,
was
¿no? De
done
concienciación, de divulgación y
with
de
research
sensibilización de la
and
población,
action
pero también se reconoce
in the
que
foundation, but also
queda un
recognizing
camino por
that
recorrer,
there
¿no?
is a way to go, a
Y
path to walk on. So
esto es centrándonos en barreras, si nos
this
centramos en las
focuses on
recomendaciones,
barriers,
en
and if we
total
focus
en el
on
documento
recommendations
van a
at this
contar con una
time,
descripción de
they're going to
39
have a
recomendaciones
description
de
of
cada una de estas
39
barreras, ¿no? Que se
recommendations
acompañan además,
that
como
come
decía mi
together
compañero Tomás, de la
with,
descripción
as
de
Thomas said,
más de
the
60
description
prácticas,
of over
prácticas
60
que han
practices
tenido lugar,
that
que han sido
have taken
exitosas
place
en
and have been
España. Y
successful in
estas
Spain.
recomendaciones
So
podemos
these
agruparlas
recommendations
también
could
en torno
also
a estas
be
7
connected to
grandes
7
categorías.
major
Empezamos con
categories.
la necesidad de
We can
incrementar
start
el
with
compromiso
the
del
need to
país
increase
en
the
torno a
commitment of the
la
country
investigación,
in
fomentar
research,
una cultura investigadora en el
fostering
sector
a
sanitario
culture of
público, dotar
investigation
de
in the health
recursos,
sector,
reconocer e
the
incentivar la investigación
resources,
clínica, trabajar en la
clinical
comunicación
research,
y en la agilización de los procesos
in
de autorización
speeding
y
up
también de inicio de los
processes
estudios,
and the beginning of
establecer
studies to
indicadores de
establish
competitividad que
the
vayan más allá de
competitiveness
esos
that would
meramente
go beyond
descriptivos de los que
the
hablábamos antes
description
y
that we
permitan
talked about
monitorizar
before, and
todo
to
el
also
proceso y que cuenten
to
además con un sistema
create the
de
whole process
actualización
and
y
to
de
have
revisión
a
periódica.
system to update and review
Reforzar el
periodically.
papel
in the role of the Latin American society as a clinical agent and together with the mechanisms for decentralization of the studies, clinical studies. So this is something that was on the table during the pandemic, but surely it will have its future, and countries are working on this. So something interesting, in our opinion, is that it impacts, as this chart says, this has been mentioned, but in addition, it has some other effects on other barriers that are not the main focus, but apart from this effect, this gives added value. So if we had to have these recommendations with the impact, undoubtedly we would have a country action item to have a strategy in place based on data and to also focus on clinical research and to face the specific barriers in the country in question that massively affect the impact. So this represents a key lever that could influence clinical research, because at the end of the day, this is an activity that's developed in periods of time that go from mid to long term. So these actions would be implemented to act upon according to these margins. So if we do specific efforts, in addition, individual efforts, probably we would not find the right results. Clinical research is something that has many faces and many agents, therefore a strategy that involves everyone and allows us to build as if it had a major effect. And there's no strategy, but there's data, because it's also part of this requirement. And we need to take advantage of that clinical research, which is highly competitive, and it's part of what needs to be harnessed. And at the end of the day, not taking any more time, the document annex has more information on the results obtained for each of the countries, and also includes a summary of the quantitative data as well as the summary of the analysis, quantitative analysis that was done on the barriers and the strength and the strengths. So I'd like to take advantage of these few seconds to encourage you to download the full report. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Ana.
Thank you very much, Anna and Thomas, for your comments, and we'd like to invite everyone of our attendees to download the study, analyze the data, and share it among your colleagues. We're going to go now to a central point of this webinar, our experts panel called Clinical Research in Latin America, Science, Strategy, and Opportunity for Development. This panel will be moderated by an acknowledged leader in the pharmaceutical sector, Dr. Susana Baldivi, current medical director of KM in Argentina, with over 29 years track record in the international pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Valdivia has occupied senior positions in medical research, institutions, regulation, and health economics in global companies and in Latin America, Europe, and the US. So apart from that, she has solid preparation in macroeconomics, artificial intelligence in health, and strategic management. And she is an ideal moderator. Dr. Baldini, thank you very much. The audience is yours.
Buenos días a todos.
Thank you all. For me, it's an honor to be able to moderate this panel called Clinical Research in Latin America, Science, Strategy, and Opportunities for Development. This is a great space for us to reflect on strategic errors that clinical research has in Latin America, and especially this workshop, which has a lot of potential, and apart from the health perspective, which is a motor for innovation and to foster regional cooperation. We would like to understand that this speeds up innovative treatments and for unsatisfied medical needs and for patients, which on the one hand strengthens the infrastructure and human resources and contributes a lot of knowledge and information on these services in these industries.
As our colleagues, Ana and Dr. Montalban told us, of course, we have some challenges before us, both for regulatory frameworks. Sometimes they need a bit of strengthening, some operational issues within institutions and health centers, and additionally, the coordination within the sector. Many times this has a part that's obviously with the regulatory entities and the ministries of health, but also with the economy or economy of knowledge, productive development, which are sectors that are difficult to relate among each other. So right now, today, with those of us who are here with us, we have two professionals from CEPAL. We have engineer Nicolo Giglio. Sorry, I practiced this and I still got confused. From the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean from CEPAL. He is the head of the Unit of Science, Technology, Innovation, Technological Extensionism, and Entrepreneurship, and he's an industrial engineer with graduate studies from MIT. And in his work, he's focused on promoting public policy that drive productive development of the region through innovation. That's why he was brought here, because this is a role that is really important to us in this panel. And from Argentina as well, we have Dr. Manfredo Cosi. He's a physician specialist in animology from the University of Buenos Aires, master's in business administration and strategic innovation from Belgrano University. He has broad experience in the pharmaceutical industry, and he participated as a medical director in clinical research, both locally as well as in Latin America, and in the direction of pharmaceutical businesses. He's an ex-president of CAEME, and he is currently an advisor for this same chamber. Also as a speaker on many subjects related to clinical research. So the idea is to ask the panelists a question, and then we can enjoy their answers and learn from their answers. You have the Q&A box, so please leave them there. Okay, Engineer Nicolo Ligo. When we look at clinical research as a productive activity, as an economy of knowledge that exports services, that brings foreign investment, and that this investment develops small and mid-sized companies that are entrepreneurs and clinical researchers in the entire health system, how do you think that this is inserted in the strategy of economic growth in Latin America?
Buenos días, Susana.
Okay, good morning.
Quisiera
Good morning,
partir por
Susana.
agradecer a
I would
FIFARMA
like to
la
start by
oportunidad de
thanking
participar
FIFARMA
en este
for the
evento
opportunity to participate
y a
in
los
this event,
consultores que presentaron el
and the
estudio, el
consultants
cual
that
vamos a
presented the
bajar y
study
revisar con
that we will
detenimiento una
be
vez que termine
reviewing
este evento.
once
A
this
ver,
event
frente a la
is over.
pregunta, me gustaría hacer un
In regards to
contexto
your
un poquitito
question, I'd
más,
like
más
to
amplio.
make a broader context.
Para la CEPAL, el
For
sector
CEPAL,
farmacéutico o, o el sector salud
pharmaceutical
o la industria de
sector,
la salud
or the health sector,
es un
or the health
sector,
industry
un
is a
sector
sector
estratégico en sí mismo. O
that is
sea, no solo
strategic in
porque
itself, not
aporta
just because it
las medicinas y
contributes
los tratamientos para la
medications
mejora de la
and
salud humana,
treatments for
sino
the
que es un
improvement
sector
of human
económico
health,
en
but
sí
because
mismo.
it's an economic sector
Es un
in
sector que
itself.
tiene mayor productividad
It's a
que
sector
otros
that
sectores
has greater
manufactureros,
productivity than
es más
other
innovador,
manufacturing
es
sectors.
más
It is
intensivo en
more
investigación y
innovative.
desarrollo,
It is more
tiene una
research and
mayor
development
proporción
intensive.
de
It has a
trabajadores
greater
calificados,
disproportion
una
of qualified
composición de
work
género más
or labor.
balanceado
It has a
y
more
salarios
balanced
más
gender
altos.
composition
¿Ya?
and higher salaries.
Por otra parte,
So,
y al mismo
on the
tiempo
other
vemos
hand,
que
at the same time, we
el sector
see that
farmacéutico
the
en América
pharmaceutical
Latina
sector
es
in
altamente
Latin America
dependiente de las
is
importaciones
highly
desde
dependent on
fuera de la
imports
región,
from
en particular lo que
outside of the
son los
region,
medicamentos más
specifically
innovadores.
for more
Eso hace
innovative
que tengamos, por
medications.
supuesto, una alta
This makes
dependencia
us have, of
de
course, a high
lo que ocurre y la
dependency
producción desde fuera de la
on
región,
what happens
dependencia
from
que fue
outside of the
evidente
region.
durante
And this
la
dependency was
pandemia,
evident
y frente a
during the
ese problema
pandemic.
fue que la CELAC,
And
la
in
Comunidad de
regards to this
Estados
problem, that was when
Latinoamericanos
CELAC, the
y Caribeños,
Latin American
fue que le
and
pidió a la CEPAL
Caribbean
hacer
community
una
asked
propuesta de
CEPAL
plan
to
de
do a
desarrollo
proposal for a
a
development
nivel
plan
regional que
at
permitiera a
regional
la
level
región tener una
that would
mayor
allow the
resiliencia y estar
region to
mejor
have a greater
preparado
resiliency, be better
frente a
prepared
otros eventos
um,
como
for other
fue el
events
COVID-19
like
y tener una menor
COVID-19
dependencia
and
de
having a
las
lower
importaciones desde fuera de la
dependency
región.
on
Y eso
imports
significaba
from
trabajar
outside of the region.
en tres
This
frentes.
meant
Por un
working
lado,
on
por
three
supuesto, lo que son
fronts.
los
On
servicios
the
de
one
salud
hand, of course,
como
health
demandante, pero
services
también
as
en el
and
ámbito del
demands, but
productivo
also
y en el ámbito
the
también de
productive
la generación
environment
de
and the
conocimiento. ¿Ya?
environment also
Con
of
tres objetivos
knowledge
principales.
generation, with three
Tener un
main
mercado
goals.
estable
First,
y de gran
having a
escala en América
stable
Latina,
market at
tener
large scale in Latin America,
fortalecer las
having
capacidades de
or
investigación y desarrollo de la
strengthening
región
the
y
research and
mejorar
development
también las
capacity
capacidades
of the region, and
productivas y
also
facilitar la
improving
integración
productive
productiva a nivel
capacities
regional.
and facilitating
Y uno de
productive
esos proyectos también
integration in
era
the region. And one of
específico
these projects was
en
also
relación
specific
a lo que es la
in
investigación
regards
clínica y los
to
ensayos clínicos,
clinical
donde se
research
veía
and
que la
clinical
región
trials,
estaba
where we saw
altamente
that the
fragmentada
region
y tenía
was
la
highly
posibilidad de
fragmented and they
fortalecer
had the
estas
possibility of
capacidades.
strengthening these capacities.
Los ensayos clínicos per se sabemos
Clinical
que
trials per
la
se,
investigación
we
clínica
know
es
that
una parte
clinical
importante
research
de lo
is
que
an
es
important part
el costo del desarrollo
of the cost of the development
de nuevos
of new
medicamentos. Por
medications.
lo tanto, junto
Therefore,
con ver
together
estos beneficios a
with
nivel de
seeing the
el
benefits
acceso de los
of the
pacientes
level of the
a
access
estos
of
nuevos desarrollos,
patients to
también
these new
genera una
developments,
actividad
this
económica
also
importante
generates
y al
an
mismo
important
tiempo
economic activity
permite
and at the same time
colocar
allows,
como una puerta de entrada a
like
mejorar las
putting this
capacidades de
entry
investigación y
door to
desarrollo
improving
en
research
la
and
región.
development
Es por eso que
capacities in
creemos
the
que
region.
tenemos que
That's why
fortalecer la
we believe that
investigación
we must
clínica,
strengthen
atraer mayor
clinical
investigación
research,
clínica y generar las
attract
condiciones para
greater
que
research, and
esto pueda
generate the
ocurrir
conditions
a nivel
for this to be able
de
to
América Latina.
happen
Ahora,
in
algunos
Latin America.
países han
Now, some
empezado a
countries have started
priorizar
to
como un
prioritize
sector estratégico
as a strategic
el
sector
sector de la salud, el sector
the
farmacéutico
health
en
sector or the
particular.
pharmaceutical
Tenemos los
sector
casos de Brasil,
specifically. We
donde
have the cases of
en la
Brazil,
nueva política industrial
where
de
the new
Brasil, el
industrial
sector
policy
farmacéutico es
of
un sector
Brazil, the
estratégico.
pharmaceutical sector
Tenemos
is a strategic sector.
la política de
We also
redistribución de
have
Colombia,
the
donde se
policy in
establece que uno de los
Colombia,
sectores estratégicos
where it is
es
established that one of the
el
strategic
sector
sectors
farmacéutico.
is the
Y en este
pharmaceutical
contexto, por
sector.
supuesto, de
And in
nuevo,
this
la
context, of
posibilidad
course,
de
again, the
fortalecer,
possibility of
desarrollar ensayos
strengthening,
clínicos
developing
es una
clinical
puerta de
trials
entrada y una
is
forma
an
de
entry
empezar
door
a generar
and a way to start
mayor conocimiento,
generating
mayor
greater
capacidades
knowledge,
en
greater
el grupo de
capacities
investigadores en la región y empezar a
in the
escalar en esta
researchers group in
cadena
the region and starting
para
to
poder llegar
scale
finalmente a
up
tener una
this
industria más
chain to be able to
fortalecida,
finally be able to
con
have a
mayor
more
capacidad de generación de
strengthened industry
conocimiento y con
with a
producción
greater
local
capacity
que
for
nos va
knowledge
a llevar
creation
a una
and
mayor
local
resiliencia
production
y una
that
mayor
will take us
soberanía
to a
sanitaria.
greater resiliency and a greater healthcare sovereignty.
Muchas gracias, Nicolo, por tu
Thank you
aporte,
so
la
much,
verdad
Nicolo,
que muy,
for your
muy
contribution.
completo. Ahora le
It's very
preguntamos de
complete.
alguna manera a
We are now going to ask Dr. Manfredo Cosi, from his experience, his vast experience that he's had, what technological resources do you consider will be necessary for the upcoming years to be able to be more competitive? We can't hear you, Manfredo, you are muted.
No,
No.
no. Hola, hola. Ahí creo que hizo un
I
ruidito.
think we were able to hear you for a second there.
Una posibilidad es
escuchan
que
ahora?
Ah,
sí,
sí.
sí.
Can you now hear me?
No, si no te iba a hacer otra pregunta, Nicole.
Bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación a
Thank you
participar de
so
este
much for the
evento.
invitation to
Es
participate in this
realmente
event.
un honor y un placer hacerlo.
It's an honor and a
Y
pleasure to do this.
considero muy importante
And I
este
consider
tipo de
that
eventos
these
para,
types of events are very
para el
important
desarrollo de la investigación
for the
clínica,
development
porque
of
desde
clinical
afuera nos miran como
research,
una
because from
unidad,
the outside, we are seen as a
porque tenemos
unit,
muchos problemas comunes
because we
y
have more
muchas
common
oportunidades
problems
comunes.
and a lot
En
of
ese
common
aspecto,
opportunities.
en el aspecto
In
de
this
lo que
aspect
se necesita
of what is
tecnológicamente,
needed technologically,
evidentemente,
evidently,
una vez obtenido nuestro mayor
once we've
insumo, el insumo
obtained
más
our
crítico, es el
greatest input,
tiempo,
our most
el
critical
tiempo de
input is
implementación de un
time,
protocolo.
the time of implementation of a
Una vez
protocol.
conseguido eso y que
Once we've
sea
obtained
competitivo
this,
y
that it can be
predecible, es decir,
competitive
sostenido
and
a través
predictable
de
and
los años,
sustainable in
evidentemente
years,
la actualización
evidently
tecnológica más importante
technological
está centrada en la historia clínica
advancement is
electrónica.
centered in the electronic
Sin este
clinical chart.
elemento, en muy
Without this
poco tiempo va a
element,
ser imposible que un centro de
in a very
investigación
short time, it
clínica
will be
pueda
impossible for
participar
a
en
research center to
investigaciones
be able
clínicas
to participate
internacionales.
in international clinical research.
La historia clínica electrónica
The electronic medical
es
chart
fundamental
is
no solo por
fundamental
la
not only
posibilidad de acceder
because
desde
of the
distintas
possibility of
distancias,
accessing
situaciones
from different distances and situations
a la historia del paciente
to the
que
patient's chart
ingresa a una investigación clínica,
that is part
sino
of a
que
clinical research,
es
but also
importante además
it's important
para
also
acelerar
to be able to speed up
el desarrollo de la investigación,
the
la
development
obtención de la
of the
información
research,
del
the
dato,
obtention of information, of data,
reducir la posibilidad de errores
reducing the
en
possibility of
la
errors
recolección y en
in the
el registro y
collection
en la recolección del
and
dato,
registration of
y
data,
fundamentalmente también
and fundamentally
ahora
also
en permitir el uso de otros
now allowing the
elementos
use of other
de
elements
monitoreo que se están desarrollando,
for
que ya
monitoring
están
that are being
bastante
developed,
avanzados, como
that are already very much advanced,
la posibilidad de protocolos
like the
descentralizados,
possibility of having decentralized
que
protocols,
significa que una democratización,
means
entre
that
comillas,
it's
de la
a
investigación clínica en un
democratization
país
of
que
clinical
permite
research
que
in a country,
pacientes
which will
que
allow
están
patients
muy alejados del centro de
that are
investigación,
very
por lo cual no
far from
podrían
the
acceder
research center,
a la
and therefore
posibilidad
they
de
wouldn't be able to
participar y de
access
beneficiarse
the
con
possibility of
una
participating in
investigación clínica,
and
lo
benefiting
puedan
from clinical research,
hacer
could be
a
able to do
través de
this through
su participación
their
con
participation
elementos que estén próximos a su
with elements
domicilio
that
y
are close to their homes
no lejos del centro de investigación clínica.
and not far from the
Eh,
clinical research center.
Otro Un elemento básico entonces es
Basic element, another
tener
basic
una
element
historia
then
clínica
would be
electrónica
having
que sea
an electronic clinical
útil
chart
e
that is
importante para la
useful
investigación
and
clínica. Es decir,
important for
no que
clinical
tenga
research, meaning
elementos de diccionarios
not that it has
internacionales
or that
aceptados
it
y
should have
validados
accepted and
que
validated
guarden
international
todas las
dictionary elements
características de
that have
confidencialidad
all the
y
characteristics of
de protección
confidentiality
de la información
and
para el
protection of the
paciente.
information
Y
for the
el
patient.
otro elemento fundamental
And the
es
other
que
fundamental
esa
element
historia clínica pueda
is that
conectarse
this clinical chart should be able to be
directamente con la
connected
herramienta
directly with the
del
tool
patrocinador de recolección de datos,
of
con el
the
CRF
data collection
electrónico.
sponsor with the
Eso,
electronic CRF.
por supuesto, además
This,
de
of
acelerar
course,
la,
additionally to speeding
la
up
recolección de datos, elimina
data
la
collection,
posibilidad de errores.
eliminates the possibility of errors.
Muchas gracias, Manfredo, por
Thank
tu
you so much,
exposición. Y sí,
Manfredo, for
realmente
your
la
presentation. And
tecnología es
yes,
algo que está
technology is
surgiendo y que
something that is
también debe
coming up and
acompañarnos en
that
este
should
desarrollo.
also
Y
support
ahora
us along
desde Chile
development.
que nos
And
está
now
acompañando la
from
doctora Mónica
Chile,
Romero,
we have
hematóloga,
Dr.
con
Mónica Romero,
diplomados
hematologist,
relacionados
with
con
several diploma
patologías
courses
hematológicas en
related
adultos
to
y más en
hematological
leucemias
pathologies in
agudos, jefa de
adults.
la unidad de investigación del
Um,
Hospital Clínico Regional Dr.
and
Guillermo Terán Benavente en
he's the
Concepción, Chile,
head
quien
of,
impulsó una
she's the
acción
head of
integral de
her
investigación clínica en el
hospital in
ámbito
Chile, and
hospitalario,
she
con enfoque
drove
en calidad,
this
formación de nuevos investigadores y
research
conexión con
in the
redes
public hospital
internacionales.
environment focused on
Doctora,
quality and the
queríamos
formation of
hacerle una
new
pregunta, ¿no?
researchers.
Desde su
And we wanted to ask
experiencia
you a
en este
question,
ámbito,
doctor, from your
¿cuáles son los
experience
principales
in this
retos
environment.
ya en
What
lo
are the main
operativo que
challenges,
usted
but
ve como
more
para
like
poder
operationally, that you
implementarlos en
see
procesos
us to be
clínicos
able to
y que
implement
sea de forma
this? And I would like
competitiva y sostenible?
to hear about this in a competitive and sustainable
Bueno, muchas
manner.
gracias ante todo
Well,
por
thank
la
you so
invitación a
much
participar
for the
para mí
invitation
en
to
representación de mi
participate,
hospital y
and
como
for
jefa
me
de
in
la unidad de
representation
investigación
of my
hospitalaria que
hospital
tenemos
and
en
as the
nuestro
head
centro.
of the
Es un orgullo poder
research
estar
unit
este
that we
panel
have.
y
It's
también poder
I feel proud to be able
visibilizando
to
una
be part of this
realidad
panel
que
and
hemos
to
ido
visualize a
mejorando
reality that we have been
para
improving
estimular la investigación
to
hospitalaria.
encourage
Creo
hospital research.
lo que
I believe
probablemente lo
that
dijeron, uno de los problemas que tenemos
probably
en
was
general
mentioned
en
already. One of the
Latinoamérica
problems that
es
we
un
have
tema
in general
legislativo.
in Latin America
La
is a
legislación en
legislative issue,
relación a lo que
legislation
va con la
in regards
investigación
to
es
what's
más
related to
antigua, por lo
research
menos en Chile.
is older. At least
La
in
ley de
Chile,
investigaciones del año
the
2006 y
research
todo este
law
gran
is
boom de
from
ensayos
2006.
clínicos
This
son
great boom of
posteriores
clinical
a esa
trials
ley. Esa
are
ley no se ha
after this law.
actualizado
This law
y
has not been
si bien está
updated.
orientada a componentes
And even though
bioéticos de la
it's
investigación,
oriented
no
towards
tiene
bioethical
un
components
marco
of
de
research,
acción
it doesn't
que
have
sea
a framework of
homologable a
action
todo el país y a todas
that
las
can be
instituciones
used in the entire
para
country
poder
and all the
ejercer
institutions
con una
to
forma
be able
mucho
to
más fluida
exercise in a more
lo que
fluent
genera todo lo
manner
que es un ensayo
everything that
clínico
is
desde la
generated
factibilidad,
by a
porque como
clinical
bien
trial, from
decía el doctor
feasibility, because
Manfredo,
as Dr.
muchas veces un
Manfredo was
ensayo
saying,
clínico en nuestra realidad
many times a
no es
clinical
factible
trial
por las
in a
distancias o por
reality
la
is not feasible because
ruralidad
of
de las personas
distances
que
or
podrían
ruralities of
eventualmente
the people who could
asistir, entonces
eventually
están orientados a
participate.
países con una
So they're
infraestructura
guided
de
more focused on
movilización para
countries
los
with
pacientes
mobilization
distinta, entonces es
infrastructure
muy
for
importante que
these
nosotros
these
veamos
patients
la
that are different.
factibilidad
So it's
real de
important for us to
ejecutar ese
see
ensayo
real
clínico en
feasibility
nuestra
of
población.
carrying out these clinical trials in our
Tenemos un tema
population.
legislativo que
Also
tiene
have a
que ver
legislative
con una
matter related
con
to
no algo claro de cómo ejecutar los
not to
contratos con la
something clear
industria,
on
sobre
how
todo en el
to
sistema
execute contracts with
público.
the
Yo
industry,
siempre estoy hablando de la
especially in
realidad
the
de
public
Chile.
system.
En el
Always talking
privado
about
tienen
Chile.
otras
The private
regulaciones, tienen otras
sector, they have other
formas de
regulations, other
gestionarse,
ways
pero en
of
el sistema
managing.
público en
But
general
in the public
en Chile se
system in
está bastante
general, in Chile,
regulado, bastante
it's very
reglado,
regulated.
entonces, y bastante
So,
vigilado.
and
Entonces, el
it has a
marco de
lot of
acción
surveillance.
para poder
So
generar
the
un
action
contrato
framework to be
donde
able to
todas
generate
las
a
partes
contract
estemos
where
en
all the
armonía,
parties
no
are
siempre
in
la
harmony
farmaindustria lo entiende.
is
¿Por
not
qué?
always understood by the
Viene con
pharma
una
industry
situación
because
de
it
que
comes
en
with a
Europa, en Estados Unidos,
situation
es
that
mucho
in
más
Europe
fácil
or in the
porque ellos
United
ya tienen
States
un
it's so much
modelo
easier
totalmente
because they already have
aprendido,
a model
contratos
that they've
prehechos,
learned,
ya sea
they have
contratos tipo
pre-made
o
contracts,
estructurados, y
they can be
nosotros con
structured
cada
contracts. And
uno de los
us,
sponsors
it's
tenemos
different
que
because with
generar
each one of the
un nuevo
sponsors,
contrato
we have to generate a
basado
new
en lo que
contract
nosotros
based on what we as a public institution can really exercise and receive and manage within the regulatory framework that we have, that, as I said, is a bit old. And the third point that I think is very important is that the training in general in Chile, in medicine, in biochemistry, is very attending. It's an attending kind of training. There is no training focused on research in the undergraduate study, so people have their brains divided between um, attending, being an attending physician or being a researcher. When we see that this goes hand in hand in Europe, it's not separate. Every time that you see a patient, you're seeing them with a comprehensive vision and potentially for research. So maybe we have to reinforce a lot more in the undergraduate and graduate studies the drive for research and for doing good research under the regulations of each country, and driving new researchers to be able to advance with our legislators in the update of laws. We still have training missing, um, and that is something that we can work on somehow by creating and strengthening the hospital research units, because by having a hospital research unit that is powerful, strong, as it happened in Spain where I had where I was lucky enough to get trained, and this migrated to the research foundations of the hospitals, and then now currently to the health research institutes regulated by the Carlos III Institute. All of this migration has allowed to professionalize and better use the resources around research. So they are different steps that should not be asynchronic. They can go hand in hand together, but everything starts by training at the hospital, at the public institution, which is where in Chile we have most of the patients, a strong research hospital research unit that can coordinate all these points in a better way, support researchers in their vision, and be able to boost quality research.
Muchas gracias, doctora.
Thank you so much,
La
doctor.
verdad es que las
Well,
agradecemos a los tres porque la
we
verdad
are
nos
so
tuvieron
thankful to the
intervenciones
three
súper
of you because
claras
you had
y
very clear
inspiradoras y con
and
perspectivas
inspiring
complementarias, ¿no?
interventions
Que nos
and with
ayuda
complementary
y que
perspectives
realmente
that
nos
help us
prepara para que
and
después
that
en la
really
lectura del
prepare us
reporte
so that
ustedes van a ver que
later we can
mucho de
read the
lo
report
que
and you can
comentaron
see that a lot
fueron
of what
también
was
hallazgos
commented
y están
were also
incluidos en
findings
lo que son las
and are also
recomendaciones del mismo,
included
¿no?
in the recommendations.
Entonces, la investigación
So,
clínica para nosotros es algo que ya
clinical
está
research for us is
sucediendo, pero
something
que tiene un
that is
potencial
already happening,
increíble
but it
de
has an
desarrollo
amazing potential
en los
for
diferentes
development
países,
in
con el
the different
compromiso de tanto
countries
las instituciones
with a
públicas como las
commitment both of
privadas,
public institutions
los
and private
investigadores
institutions,
y bueno,
clinical
principalmente los
researchers,
gobiernos, ¿no? Como
and mainly
mencionaron
governments,
los expertos de CIDI,
as the
justamente de la
experts
necesidad que
were
esto sea
just
una decisión
mentioning,
de Estado.
the need for this
El
to be a
doctor
state decision.
Cosi nos comentó
Dr.
justamente
Kosi
sobre la
commented
tecnología,
about the
¿no?
technology.
El ingeniero Gligo
Engineer
nos comentó
Gligo
desde la perspectiva de
commented from the
desarrollo económico y
perspective
productivo de la
of
región,
economic and
y
productive
la doctora
development of the
Romero
region,
sobre la
Dr.
práctica
Romero
diaria, ¿no?
on the
Y vemos
daily
cómo se nos
practice,
dibujan también
and
estos
we
sesgos, ¿no?
see
De la necesidad de una
how
modernización, una
we're seeing these
transformación
settings of the
de
need of a
procesos, marcos
modernization and transformation of
regulatorios,
processes,
un
regulatory
eje de
frameworks,
transformación digital
a digital
en todos
transformation
bueno, los
axis
niveles y
at
un
all
régimen de
levels,
promoción que incluya
and a
tanto
promotion regime
promoción
that
educativa, ¿no?
includes
Para
both
la población
educational promotion
y
for the
para lo
population
que es todos los
and
integrantes
for
de lo
all
que
the
es
members
investigación clínica, profesionales de la
in
salud
clinical research,
relacionados,
healthcare
incluso
professionals,
España está trabajando
even
en difusión en
we're
grado
working
y ahora
on
está empezando
disseminating this, and
promoción en escuelas
we're
secundarias, en
starting with
bachilleratos.
promotion
Así
in
que
high schools.
tenemos una conclusión
So we
contundente.
have a
No podemos
strong conclusion.
desaprovechar la oportunidad de
We have
crecer
to
en
take advantage
investigación
of
clínica.
the opportunity to
Tenemos
grow in
que
clinical research.
articularnos
We
más,
have to
tener
coordinate better,
la generación de
have
confianza
the
y poder
generation of
apostar de
trust,
manera decidida,
and be
¿no?
able
Para
to
que esto se vuelva
bet in a decisive manner so that this becomes a regional priority, and so that when we're looked at from the outside, they can see that we're advancing in this direction. And from FIFARMA, and representing the sector that does clinical research and innovation companies, we're also committed to having these spaces for dialogue and be able to collaborate and build together. So thank you so much to our participants and to the audience, to everybody who participated in the panel, especially those who worked for this event to be possible. And we hope we can keep working together so that Latin America can not only participate in global research, but can lead with knowledge, with commitment, and vision towards the future. Diego?
Muchas gracias, Susana.
Thank
Y
you,
muchas gracias
Susana.
a Nicolo,
Thank you,
al doctor Manfredo, a la
eh,
doctora Mónica
Nicolo, Dr.
y al
Manfredo,
equipo de
Dr.
CIDI
Mónica,
por su
and the CD
participación en este
team
webinar.
for their
Hoy ha quedado claro que la
participation
investigación
in this
clínica
webinar. It's
no
clear
solo es una
today that
herramienta
clinical research
científica,
is not just
sino
a
también una
scientific
palanca
tool,
estratégica para
but
transformar
also
la
a
salud,
strategic leverage to
fortalecer nuestros sistemas
transform
sanitarios e
health and
dinamizar las economías
strengthen
de
our
América
health
Latina.
system and dynamize
El estudio
the
que
economies in
desarrollamos
Latin
no
America.
solo
The study
identifica
that we
barreras,
carried out
también
not only
propone soluciones
identifies
concretas
barriers,
basadas
but
en buenas
proposes
prácticas
concrete
y
solutions
experiencias
based on good
internacionales
practices and
adaptables a nuestra
international
región.
experiences that are
Nuestros
adaptable to
panelistas
our
nos dejan
region.
mensajes poderosos.
Our panelists
La
leave us
investigación
powerful
clínica
messages.
mejora la calidad de
Clinical
vida de las
research
poblaciones,
improves the quality
genera
of
impacto en
life of
múltiples
populations,
niveles para los
generates impact at
pacientes,
multiple
los
levels for
profesionales de salud,
patients and
los sistemas
professionals
sanitarios y las
and
economías
health
nacionales.
systems and
Cada
national
estudio clínico
economies.
es también
Each
inversión en
clinical
talento,
trial is also an investment
infraestructura,
in talent,
conocimiento
infrastructure,
y desarrollo
knowledge,
científico local.
and
Pero
local
también nos deja una
scientific development.
advertencia.
But it also
Esfuerzos
leaves us with a
aislados no
warning.
alcanzarán los resultados
Isolated
esperados.
efforts will not be able
Para
to
que la
reach
región de
expected
América Latina
results.
avance, se
For
requiere
the
una
region in
estrategia de
Latin America
país
to
basada en
advance,
datos
we need
y
a
una
country
visión de
strategy
largo
based
plazo que
on data
convierta la
and a
investigación
long-term vision
clínica
that turns
en una prioridad
clinical
nacional.
research
Como
into
Susana
a
lo
national
mencionaba, desde
priority.
FIFARMA
As Susana
reiteramos
was
nuestro
mentioning from
compromiso con ese
FIFARMA, we
propósito.
reiterate our commitment
Seguiremos
towards this
impulsando la
purpose,
armonización
and we will
regulatoria,
keep
el
driving
fortalecimiento
regulatory
de las capacidades
harmonization, the
locales
strengthening
y
of
la
local
promoción de
capacities,
políticas
and the
públicas
promotion
basadas en
of public
evidencia.
policies
Los
that are
invitamos a descargar el
evidence-based.
estudio completo desde
We
nuestra
invite
página
you to
web,
download the full
a
study from our
utilizarlo como una
webpage,
herramienta de trabajo
using it
y a
as
compartir
a
sus
work
hallazgos.
tool in
También pueden
sharing the
visitar nuestras redes
findings.
sociales,
You
donde
may
encontrarán
also visit
materiales
our social media where
complementarios
you will
y
find
otros recursos de valor.
complementary materials
Agradecemos
and resources.
profundamente a CIDI
We
Salud
are
por la
deeply
rigurosidad del
thankful to CD
análisis,
Salud
de
for the
nuevo a nuestros
rigorosity of the
panelistas por su
analysis,
visión
and once again
estratégica
to our panelists
y a
for their
todos
strategic
ustedes por
vision,
su
and
interés
all
y
of
su
you for
compromiso.
your interest and your
Sigamos
commitment.
construyendo juntos una
Let's keep
región más
building together
conectada,
a more
más
connected region,
competitiva
more
y más
competitive,
comprometida con la ciencia
more
al servicio
committed
de las
to
personas.
science at the
Muchas
service of
gracias
people.
y hasta pronto.
Thank you so much and have a great day.